My first classic Doctor Who serial, which I covered recently, was Genesis of the Daleks. It had been recorded off the telly on one of its many repeats, and I loved it. And it was from there that I started buying up the very few classic Doctor Who DVDs that had been released at the time with money saved up from my paper round. And they weren't cheap, it was about £20 a DVD or something like that. And as I slowly became an obsessive fanboy googling all of the classic Doctor Who information, I was amazed to learn that there was actually a second classic Doctor Who serial featuring Tom Baker, the Daleks and Davros. It hadn't been released on DVD yet, and the VHS copy was really expensive on eBay, so that meant I couldn't watch it. But after quite a while, I discovered that some nice people had started uploading old Doctor Who serials that were yet to be released on DVD to a little website called YouTube, because uploading copyrighted material wholesale was pretty much what the site was for back in the day. So specky little nerd me cycled to the library, which was the only place I could get a decent internet connection at the time, to watch the fabled follow-up to Genesis of the Daleks that I've been searching for a long time, Destiny of the Daleks. And it was on that day that little specky nerd Stuart learned the valuable lesson that basically the same thing done again will never be anywhere near as good the second time round, and in most cases it will probably be kind of shit. It was naive of me to consider otherwise maybe, but in fairness to me, I was a stupid little kid. The people who actually made Destiny of the Daleks were professionals who should have known better. So the plot is basically the Fourth Doctor goes back to Skaro again, where the Daleks are now in a new war with a new race called the Movellans. And the Daleks are looking for their creator, Davros, who apparently wasn't brutally murdered by his own creations at the end of Genesis. No, he's been in suspended animation. The central problem with Destiny of the Daleks is that it's half-arsed and completely redundant. New script editor at the time, Douglas Adams, who, you may have heard of, ended up doing extensive rewrites after Nation allegedly delivered nothing more than an outline of a story that basically just existed to rehash old Dalek serials. I kind of appreciate that Douglas Adams basically went through it adding self-aware lines pointing out how there is nothing new at all in this, because that's the only way that anyone was ever going to get any enjoyment out of this episode. The Doctor's going, yes, viewer, I agree with you. There is absolutely no reason for this story to exist.
Let's see where we are.
Oh look! Rocks!
So episode 1 primarily features the Doctor and Romana wandering through a wasteland being confronted with weird inexplicable images. Gee, sound familiar? But unlike episode 1 of Genesis, it doesn't tell you that this is Skaro, and there's no hook here, no urgency, no immediacy. There is some action, the Doctor gets squished by a falling pillar at one point, but he's still making jokes during it, and he even gets a book out and starts reading while he waits for Romana to go get help, and that pretty much says it all, doesn't it? The episode's so boring that even the Doctor can't be asked to pay attention to it. And while Destiny copies the opening outline of Genesis, I can't help but contrast how little there is going on in it with that story, because Genesis opens with its ambitious hook, its colourful characters, and it makes a case for itself with passionate intensity. Destiny takes so long to get going and is the definition of tumbleweed, probably because it doesn't have any ideas of its own. It's like Genesis with all the allegories stripped out. So yes, here at the start of the story is an incredibly interesting scene where the Doctor and Romana are examining a piece of concrete. Wow, how fascinating. Alright, so this sequence at the end of episode 1 with Romana walking down a corridor until she meets a Dalek for the first time is quite nice, but the tension is pretty much just based on what the audience is expecting. They're sat there just waiting for a Dalek to appear, because you know what's about to happen. From the moment you enter this scene, it looks like the scene where she's about to stumble across a Dalek for the first time, so if you know what's going to happen, it's not a surprise. So what's the point then? All that Destiny really has at its disposal is recognition. Like this bit here where it's got the Fourth Doctor's look of shock and horror as he realises that we're back on Skaro. Again. It tries desperately hard to recapture the magic of past Dalek serials just for the sake of it rather than because it's got anything that it actually wants to say. The reason for its existence is basically just, we want to do another Dalek serial. Here it is. So the Daleks set Romana to work in these mines that they're digging using slave labour, because you remember Dalek Invasion of Earth, right? Well, actually, people wouldn't, because Dalek Invasion of Earth was well over 15 years ago at the time that Destiny was made. And this is an interesting point that I want to hammer into the ground for a moment. The new generation of kids watching Destiny of the Daleks wouldn't necessarily have seen the stories that it's cribbing from. You gotta remember that this was a few years before VHS home releases became a thing, and aside from the odd repeat here and there, the only way that most fans would be able to experience the old serials was through the Target novelizations. TV was essentially just made, broadcast, and then gone for most people. They couldn't experience it again. So providing the current generation, who were 4 years out from the last Dalek serial at this point, with a Dalek serial for them that basically contained all of the elements from the previous ones, kinda made sense. In the context of 1979. It doesn't make any sense watching Destiny now though, because you've got Dalek Invasion of Earth, you've got Genesis of the Daleks, better stories are available, so what do you need this one for? Destiny of the Daleks is storytelling by way of a software update. It's explicitly not a new thing, it's just there to build on what's already there, and like a software update, it takes forever to install, and once it has, you won't notice any change whatsoever. Well, the one change is the Thals are now called the Movellans and they now have tinsel for hair and no personality. It's exactly like the old stories, but rubbish. There are a few reasons people remember Destiny of the Daleks though. Not many, but there are a few reasons why it's famous. Like I said, it stands out for being a 4th Doctor Dalek serial. Even though it's got nothing to say and no reason to exist, scarcity is probably the reason that people valued Destiny. That and some of the lines added by Adams lampshading the frankly rubbish material are admittedly pretty funny. That and it's also notable for being the first story featuring the second regeneration of the Doctor's Time Lady companion, Romana. I did admittedly find Romana's regeneration scene pretty funny, you know, where she's trying on new bodies like a human would try on clothes. Although bringing this up at all would probably cause other fans' brains to explode, because it's a really strange depiction of regeneration, and people's heads have melted trying to explain how this works over the years. Personally, I just took it as a silly little joke scene, and as I've said before, I've never really taken Doctor Who's continuity very seriously anyway, and this scene is kind of emblematic of how it's basically just making up how it works as it goes along, like a bunch of kids on a playground. And speaking of continuity, I'm sure people are going to expect me to start berating the story for saying that the Daleks are robots now. But I kind of see why it does that and plays up this idea of the Movellans, a robot race, fighting the Daleks, supposedly another robot race, and how they're caught in a trap of logic. It only really does that because it's trying desperately hard to drag any interesting ideas at all kicking and screaming out of this dry story. And to be honest, if it didn't have baffling creative decisions like that in there, then what else would there be to talk about? Oh my god, look guys, this Dalek is a slightly different shade of grey to the Daleks in the previous story. Quick, everyone, must buy new merchandise.